I very much look forward to networking events because I'm like, I don't have to prepare for this in any way. The only thing I need to do is just be myself, and the people who will resonate with that will resonate with that, and the people who won't. But at the end of the day, like I just showed up as me, and yeah, the networking happens as a byproduct of that. Hello everyone, welcome back to Foreign Gems.
Yeah, we're bringing you foreign perspectives on familiar topics.
I'm Mac.
I am Ola.
And this week we're talking about networking.
Yeah, Mac suggested this earlier on today, and as usual, we try not to over-prepare for this so that it can be as organic as possible. So I'm excited to dive into this topic as y'all are excited to hear about what we talk about today.
Yeah, I think it actually took us quite a while to get to this topic because it's so important to your self-development and to your career development. But I'm glad that we're getting to it now. I think it's actually good with some of the context of the other topics that we've talked about, so you can keep some of those frameworks or ideas or tips in mind as you go into, doing some of this networking activities.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's not released now, but our last recorded episode, actually, we talked a lot about the values of networking. So it's a theme that has been coming up and will keep coming up. So we are just giving you the 101, the introduction, but I'm sure some of our guests in the future would have even way more examples that will be more unique to you.
Yeah, and honestly, networking has played a big role just in our individual careers, but also in this podcast a lot. Like a lot of the guests, I say a lot of the guests, but all of the guests that have come on are members of our network, and that's the reason that they were on the podcast in the first place. That's how we got to learn what it is they're working on, what they're building, and why we thought their stories would be important to the listeners.
Yeah, I totally agree. We shouldn't even call them guests. They're more like friends.
Yeah.
They are friends, and there are people that there was never any intentions of us starting a podcast. Not to even speak of them showing up to the podcast, but it's magical. That's one of the magic of networking. You never know what could happen in the future. So we want to make this very actionable for you all today. So. We'll take you through, a bit of a journey of what we think you should know about networking. So I think, Mark.
Yeah, let's do that. I actually wanted to quickly touch on why I think networking is so powerful with a bit of a story. So I mentioned in a previous episode when we were talking about how I got my start in tech that it just so happened that, a professor of mine was working at this company and he had the opportunity, and I was kind of in the right place at the right moment. But all of those things wouldn't have come together if I wasn't staying in touch with this professor throughout kind of my own entrepreneurship journey, and then B, of course, like being able to know about these opportunities that are happening. And I knew like the company was something that was up and coming within the city, and the reason I knew that was from networking events. And the reason the professor knew that I had the skills necessary to join the company at the time is because we had been keeping in touch. So again, a result of networking. I studied something completely unrelated to the job I ended up getting in tech, and the reason that door was open for me is a result of networking. So I think back to like what are some of the key things that happened, and staying in touch with the network was like a big catalyst as to how I got into tech.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me because in episode 3, when we talked about unconventional career paths, we talked about there was a lot of similarities in our path, and it was similar to mine as well. My start in tech was from when I created a company, and I found a company in the newspaper that was doing something similar. So then I noticed that they had shut down and started doing something else. So I reached out to them just to get advice, and they ended up just becoming my friends. And then we would go to events together, startup events. Then I would just give them a ride. And there was actually an event that I pitched, the one that I completely blacked out. One of them was also pitching at the event, and they were up next after me. So as soon as I was going off stage, I saw the name. I gave them the heads up, so they were more prepared. So they actually won the thing. So there was a little bit of the goodwill, like towards me.
Yeah.
And by the time I was looking, when my startup failed and I was looking for a job, that was the person I reached out to see if they had an opening. And before they even had the job posting up, I had my interview.
So as you can notice with like both of our stories, a key like pivotal moment was the timing as well. So like we were in university around the time that these things happened, and that's something that I even mentioned before we hit record on this episode, is to mention the importance of spending that time wisely when you're in university, because you just have so much access to people who are building in lots of varying disciplines. You have a lot of time to also pursue your passions, and I think that can be one of the most pivotal times in your life if you use it really, really well. Say what you will about the education system in general. One thing it does really well is put like-minded people together, and so take advantage of that situation. Make sure you are, chasing any interest that you have, any networking type events that are happening. Make sure you go to them and just be social. That's something else that we want to talk about a little bit when it comes to networking.
That's something that I found that I stumbled upon as well in university. Just because I was always working a lot, I didn't always go to every class.
Yep.
But I'll keep saying this over the course of this podcast, like shit into sugar, like turning disadvantage into an opportunity. And an example of that was just because I needed to make money, I would host events, host parties and everything. So that was networking. I didn't know. I was building my social network. So even though I wasn't, going to classes as much, everyone knew me. So that really did help me. It also helped me with like assignments, and to the point of my professors. Like I got a lot of exams deferred because my professors knew of me. They knew of things I'd done. So it was like goodwill. And yeah, university setting is like the easiest place to make friendship. Not even just university, just wherever your immediate environment is, because a lot of our listeners are out of university right now, and look at your local surroundings.
Yeah, so now we're getting a little bit into the how. We've talked about why it's really important for you to network, but now we're talking a little bit more about the best ways that you can go about networking. So we mentioned one, university for sure, and then Ola just mentioned a really important one, which is just what's happening around you. In this day and age of working from home, getting really familiar with your routine and then just following that, you can kind of fall off from being social, getting to know new people, meeting people who are building things that are interesting to you. It becomes more difficult to do that, and we tend to default to other methods of doing that, maybe like through YouTube or something, or through books. But the power of actually being in front of somebody who has a shared interest, and you can see their reactions to the things that you're saying. You can tell right away whether or not you're vibing with that person. I think is super important to also spend a lot of time and energy towards. Personally, since the layoff happened for me like 10 weeks ago now, I've been spending more and more time outside of my home office, which has been amazing for my networking. I've met so many people here in the last like 10 weeks. I'd say I've met more people in the last 10 weeks than I did in the last like 2.5 years or so that I was living in Vancouver. Of course, I mean, the pandemic was going on at the same time, so there's more factors than me just working all the time. But because I'm more open towards it and I'm pursuing it more actively, I'm just meeting more and more interesting people who are building more and more interesting things. And you never know where your next kind of opportunity will come from. And it's been working out that way so far for me.
Yeah, I think the general theme is just circle of influence. Start from the closest people to you, maybe even your family, because some people, you never know who your brother, your sister knows that can help you or with an idea or anything. It's always best to start with that. And to be honest though, in most cases when you're doing, especially if it's a crazy project, the closest people to you are not always the most supportive initially, but still start from that. You get some quick wins. Yeah. So like the last guest that we are going to release the episode at some point.
Yeah.
He was actually the first person that I discussed, the concept with after Mac and I already discussed it, and he was also our first listener. So like, he's a friend, but he's like family. For me, that was like my circle of influence. And then after that, it's like you start looking at social network. You start looking at other areas that you can expand to.
I really like that. I like the idea of kind of having a close group of people, whether they're your family or your friends, to like help validate your projects as well, especially if they're invested in your success. Like Ola just mentioned, like sometimes maybe they won't be as supportive of a crazy idea just because it's outside of their sphere of imagination, so to speak. But if they are interested, like take advantage of that situation, work with them to kind of help shape what it is that you're building, if they really care, they're going to give you really constructive criticism really early on, and it could help like supercharge your project really early before you are sending it out to the masses of people who you're not as familiar with. And of course, having that close relationship with them will allow for more honest communication as well, so that can be really helpful too, especially early on.
Yeah, I totally agree. What are some other places, like what are places that people can network?
Great question. So for me, what's been working really well recently is this app called Eventbrite. So what it is essentially just an app that curates all of the events that are happening around you, and you can kind of determine how far you're willing to travel for this event, what kind of event you're looking for. So like entertainment type events are on there. Some concerts make it on there, especially if they're a little bit smaller and they're not like taken up by Ticketmaster or something. And networking is like a key one that's there as well. It's like one of the key categories that they have. And what this has allowed me to do is to just quickly open up an app, see what's happening around me in the next 2 weeks or so, and just to start filling out a calendar with things that I think are interesting. The good thing about that particular app is that it actually has a lot of free events, which of course is very nice, especially if you're just starting off. You don't necessarily want to invest in something, but a lot of them are also part of a consistent group of events that are happening. So a quick shout out to one of them is Vancouver Tech Journal. They have a lot of events that happen throughout the month, and you can quickly search by that name and you'll be able to see all of them, some of them paid, some of them not, and then you can kind of just pick and choose which ones are interesting to you. And yeah, you'll find a lot of people who are thinking along those same lines as well. But this is a very specific example because I don't know like how worldwide Eventbrite is. Do you?
I think it is. It's huge.
Yeah,
They've been around for a while.
It's at least Canada wide, right? You gotta be maybe even
in the States as well.
North America wide. Yeah, so it's a super powerful app. But if you're somewhere where you don't have access to this, I guarantee there's a local solution that would accomplish the same thing. And if there's not, you should build it.
yeah, that's a side hustle idea. Well, it could scale as well. But yeah, just your local event app, that always helps. If you don't have apps and for some reason you're finding this podcast and you don't have apps, use your newspaper, just your local events directory, I should say. Yeah. The other ones, the ones that I've found, well, first of all, I think before you even look at places, think of the type of networking you want to do.
Yeah.
Who are the type of people you're trying to reach, and where do they hang out? So the ones that have helped me mostly, there's LinkedIn, which a lot of people use. Mark might talk about that because he's more familiar with LinkedIn than I am. Twitter is one that I've found very useful in the Notion community that I'm in. Twitter is just super valuable for that. There's Facebook groups that I've been part of. There's Reddit. Reddit is very, danger zone, proceed with caution. But, you can form your network. You can find your hive, find your like-minded people. Clubhouse was one that helped my SEO career a lot. I just stumbled across it, and then I found this community of people, and professionally and even personally, like we are friends now. I emceed Moscon, one of the people that host the regular rooms. Through me mentioning his name, he's now a regular speaker at Moscon himself, and it's just like we've all helped each other grow. Like there are a lot of people that were like interns when they started, and now they're like director of like SEO at places. It's just wild to see how people from internet just all met together, and we just networked.
I'm so glad you mentioned social media as part of the strategy. Clubhouse was incredibly interesting to me, so we should talk about that sometime. I think that could be a very interesting conversation because it was such a new way of communicating. It's like a social media, but very specific to a particular idea. Actually, do you want to introduce it a little bit?
Yeah. So yeah, okay, I guess Clubhouse started during the pandemic when everyone were home and we all didn't go anywhere, and people needed a way to connect with other people. And the concept of podcast of Clubhouse, for anyone that doesn't know, it's like podcast, but everyone is allowed to come on stage if you request to. You can contribute to the conversation. It's all real time. It's very interactive. So it's like, think of it like hanging out with a bunch of people in a room, except it's all virtual. So that's the concept, and they're all broken into different rooms. So there's rooms for different interests. Now they call it houses. So there's marketing house, soccer house, celebrity gossip. There's been a lot of things that Clubhouse has been made for. Elon Musk, that was the time he was there for like 3 hours. He was just talking to people. I was in the audience, and I was not in San Francisco at the time, but it felt like we were in the same living room. There's been Mark Zuckerberg was on it one time. I think Oprah was on it at some point.
Wow.
Like almost anyone you can imagine. Snoop Dogg is like a regular, Meek Mill. You get all this exposure to all of these famous people in a clubhouse.
It was amazing when it started. I remember it was maybe, I don't know if it started during the pandemic, but definitely got very, very popular during the pandemic for obvious reasons. You can still kind of connect, do some networking, which is what we're talking about, through with people who are all over the world, and so it really enabled that in a time when people needed another way of connecting. So I remember spending a lot of time on Clubhouse. The reason I wanted you to do a quick explanation on that, it's popular enough that people would know it in North America, but I got some feedback today on the podcast from my mom, incidentally. She's like, sometimes you mention tools and you're talking about them as if everybody knows about what these are, but maybe you just give like a quick introduction. So that was on a recent episode that just dropped where we were talking about Notion.
That's interesting. Yeah, we have to keep that in mind for sure.
Yeah.
It's going to be challenging because, for people who have been following the journey of the podcast, we might refer to a lot of things and it might seem repetitive, but bear with us. Now you know why we're going to, if at some point we are repeating things that you already know, this is why. Shout out to Mac's mom. She's one of our
OG
top listeners and fans. Yeah. So those are the people that are helping us keep going. Networking, she's supporting us
early stages,
morally, emotionally, and spiritually. Yeah. So that's a good tip. You mentioned social network.
Yep.
It's right in the name. Network. A lot of the social part and the networking. A lot of people forget about that. Yep. It's not just to share your updates or things you're doing. Socialize with people and network with people. It's literally there. Yep. Any social network, use it for that.
Exactly, and some will lend themselves more to certain disciplines than others. Ola just mentioned that a little bit earlier as well. So think of the audience that it is that you're going for, and then use that network, so to speak, for that. So for example, if you're taking photos a lot or you create videos, Instagram could be a really great network for you. But if your ideas are more so about how to think or what to write about, something like Twitter could maybe lend itself a little bit better. And if you're trying to network specifically just for maybe corporate, LinkedIn is a little bit better for that as well. So pick and choose your network and become really good at it, and make sure that you're spending time not just kind of consuming the content that's on there, but producing some content too, which also enables your conversations, especially when it comes to random people. If you're shooting your shot and you're DMing that person and you like a particular project that they have, it's nice when you also have something to show. That's something that Fez mentioned as well in an episode that I guess will have just aired, so you will know some of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Hopefully you listen to that episode too. But one key nugget that he dropped is have something to show, and that's a nice kind of tip to take even when it comes to networking. You should be aware that people are going to want you to show your stuff when they're meeting with you, and that's how you become memorable. And so make sure you have just something to show, even if it's just having a very clear understanding of your mission.
I 1000% agree. And the thing is, I've noticed is when you see like artists, you see like, I don't know, some musician hanging out with poets or dancers. The thing is, great people like to hang out with other great people, even if you're not necessarily doing the same thing. So if you're trying to break into like a field, even if you're not necessarily great in that, whatever you're good at, just show it. Like just show how you're good in that place. That is your key into another setting. Because if people see that you're great at something else, then, I mean, if you have nothing, you could be a great human. You could just be nice. You could have the best smile. I don't know, whatever you have. But everyone has something that, yeah, just like Max said, show something. You can't just go from nowhere to like into meeting people sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of kind of things that could be in the way of somebody networking, what are some of the challenges that you have experienced maybe earlier on when you were just beginning networking?
Yeah, everyone starts at zero when you create like a social media account. So I'll give the Twitter example,
Yep.
and I'll give the Clubhouse. So the Twitter, I had zero, followers, and then I'll tweet stuff and no one would engage. There was nothing. So then I realized that it was like trying to invite people to my party. If you have nobody, you don't invite people to your party, you go to other people's party. So then I go into people's comments, like replies, then you say something insightful, and then you still don't get followers or whatever, but eventually the person would engage with you. And just be genuine, don't try to game it, but you have to like touch points with people. It's like marketing, multiple touch points. If you keep responding to the exact same person's tweets over time, they will notice who you are, and then they start engaging with you. And then their audience, because you get engaging with you, they'll build an affinity with you, and then they start following you. And then with all these things, it's exponential. Initially, like, I think my first 100 followers was like, it took forever. And once it was past that, it just like, it comes in waves and it just grows fast. And Clubhouse, the same thing. I'll be in the audience. There was, no one knew me, so no one will bring me on stage. And I don't know, for some crazy reason, there was this VP of like product at, I think, Shopify at the time, just added me on stage. He's like, "Hey, Ola, I like your name. You sound like you might be an interesting man. Do you have anything to say?" I was like, "No, I have nothing to say right now." I was just like, lurking in the room. And he's like, "Oh, you work at Mars?" And then he started asking me these questions. So the more I was talking, then I started seeing people like following me. So they were like, they started following me, and then he followed me. So then that just became exponential. So anytime I go into a room, people see that he follows me, and then they want to talk to me. So yeah, it's just put yourself out there, put yourself in other people's spaces, and things happen.
That's what I heard a lot from both of those examples. Is you weren't afraid to hop into the comment section, into the reply section on Twitter. I think that's the appropriate term for the replies.
Mm-hmm.
And you engage with the people, even if you have no followers to begin with. You're showing that you have something important to say. And when you got that opportunity to go up on stage on Clubhouse, you took the opportunity as well to talk a little bit more about what it is that you're doing, what it is that you're interested in. And then all of a sudden, the people who are listening, they become more curious about you, and then now you have a bit of an audience yourself. And then hopefully through all of this, you become the room setter, essentially. You become the party, and you allow other people to also grow from that, because it's not just about building your own network, like a special key, you could call it, or a gem. What do you call a gem? A gem is helping your network with one another. So one of the really powerful concepts within networking is that you don't necessarily have to gain something from an engagement with somebody else. It could be enough just to know what somebody is working on, and then when you know what somebody else is working on and those two fit, when you put them together, they have you to thank for it, and
Be
they
a
will
connector
remember that.
or a conduit.
Be a conduit. I love that word. Be a conduit between two people who are working on something, even if you can't really offer either of those people something. What you've offered them is that network, that link that they now have, and that is super powerful. They'll remember you when it comes time to, you to either contribute or they run into somebody else that might require what it is you have to offer. I think it's super important to keep that in mind. Yeah, maybe I can't do anything for this person right now, or they can't do anything for me right now, but I'm really interested in what it is they're working on, and I'm going to keep them in mind for any opportunities that come up for them.
Yeah, that's great advice. It's, a concept that might help people, which I think I learned in biology, is like concept of ecosystems. Like just any place you want to network, just look at the ecosystem, understand what role you can play. So in an ecosystem, there'll be producers, there'll be distributors, there'll be cheerleaders who don't necessarily do anything, but they just make sure that everyone else is motivated. There'll be a role that you can play as long as you play a role and you're really good at it. A lot of people build their following on like Clubhouse then just being moderators. They have no insights to share, but they go to these big rooms, they message the celebrities and say, hey, I can moderate this for you just so that you don't have to worry about doing this. And then they become a moderator, they're in all these big rooms every day, and all of a sudden they have like 20,000 followers, 30,000. All they do is just put people on stage, put people down, remove bad actors, that's it. Like play a role that is natural to you in an ecosystem, and good things happen. Even back to Clubhouse, Notion Club, I started that as well, and that helped me in the Notion community, and I didn't have to do much. All I did is created a room, and then I would just set up events randomly, and I just facilitate it, and other people just come on, share their insights, and the club kept growing and growing. And that comes back to you as the person that took the initiative.
Yeah, I love that. Let's hop into some of the pitfalls that can happen when it comes to networking, especially when you're networking for the first time. I remember when I was first going to networking events with that in mind specifically. It's like, I'm going here to network. Like, I'm going to get 10 LinkedIn contacts from this event, and that's how I know I would have been successful in this event. One of the issues that I ran into was I got very nervous. I started to clam up. I was like presenting a particular version of myself. I wasn't really being myself. So one thing that I learned really, really quickly is if you label it as, oh, I'm going over here to network, it might actually like hold you back from being yourself, and yourself is actually who people want to meet. Like what it is that you produce and what it is that you sell, whatever it may be. That's like a part of you, but it's not the whole you. And people, they buy from people, not necessarily from like the actual service of the product. So being personable and like being yourself and going out there to just essentially make friends and take the pressure off of the situation completely changed the game for me. And now I very much look forward to networking events because I'm like, I don't have to prepare for this in any way. The only thing I need to do is just be myself, and the people who will resonate with that will resonate with that, and the people who won't. But at the end of the day, like I just showed up as me, and yeah, the networking happens as a byproduct of that.
That's perfect. Just what you said, I could not have said that any better. So anyone listening to this, great advice from Mac. Networking events you should not go with the purpose of networking. Whatever you read places out to network, just forget all of that stuff. Just be a good human. Just have a conversation with people. Be interested in people. What are you working on? What are you doing? Oh, great talk. You mentioned this book. What else did you learn from the book? Where can I get it? Even if you want to like go a step above, oh, we're both in town. Can I borrow the copy from you? Now you've taken that from this random stranger to like possible friendship, and it's just be relatable. Just be human. Don't try to force anything. I was mentioned to Mac before we started recording that one of my pet peeves is when I go to an event and professional event, and someone comes to me and we have a conversation of like 10 seconds, and they're like trying to add me on LinkedIn. I was like, well, I will add you, but nothing comes from that. We will probably never interact because we didn't really build any connection. The best ones are the ones where you have a long conversation and you even forget to get any contact. And a lot of people try to play the numbers games. You go to an event and you're trying to meet as many people as possible. Like I said, those things don't go anywhere. But if you go to an event and you meet one person and it's a solid friendship, that's a win, because that person can then connect you to more and more people. And just be organic and let relationships grow.
I love that advice. Definitely just go with the flow and be organic. And if something is interesting you, don't then kill that conversation because you've got some sort of a quota to meet. Just be yourself and be present. And something that Ola just mentioned that is really, really important is to show genuine interest in other people. If you go into the networking event with the goal of you presenting yourself, that's when nerves and things like that start to come into play. But if your goal is just to go over there and learn as much as possible, meet interesting people and learn how, like, what problems they're having, the whole event is gonna go way smoother for you.
I totally agree. That's a pitfall that I had before though, because I would be like talking to someone and I'll be like, oh, I've been here for 30 minutes and I need to go meet other people. Then you're like looking around and the other person can feel it that you're not present and it just messes it. But now I find it just feels more satisfactory when I meet one person and there's genuine friendship. And there's a lot of values that comes from those networking too, just by being someone's friend. Like they know you, they know your pets, they know all these things, and you'd never even have to tell them. They just, whenever there's a thing that you can do for them, or that they know someone that needs help, they'll just naturally refer to you because you're like their friend. Then they don't have to it's nothing professional anymore. And it's like that in VC, it's like that in music. All of the best collaborations that you find, they are not from they're not from trying to network. They're usually from that organic friendship that people form over years.
So true, man.
Even this podcast, as an example,
it comes from a friendship. It's like a friendship first, then you build something together.
Yeah, we didn't just say let's start a podcast. Like we hung out, a group of friends, go to events together, just natural friendship, and yeah.
Yeah, so true, man. I really like the idea of thinking about it as just like you going out there to make friends and treating it as such, and also treating your friends with that kind of respect as well. You wouldn't just use your friends for whatever opportunities that they have, right? So it's the same thing when you do your networking. Yes, you're being intentional with the fact that you're going out to create more connections, but you love and respect those connections. And I mean, if you think about it, if you had a job available, you'd rather give it to your friend than give it to somebody you don't really know. So that's the power, like that networking and bringing friendship into like one bucket can have on the path of your career and beyond that, actually.
Yeah, totally agree. Try and think of other pitfalls that I have personally encountered. I don't know. In the process of trying to be friends with someone, don't make other people look bad, because any smart person would know that if they do it with you, they'll do it to you. So if you are, just in order to be friends with someone, you're like saying, oh, that person is so terrible, blah, blah, blah. A smart person will read through that. In the moment, you have a great conversation, but they won't trust you. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Just be pure.
And that's just good advice for life in general. It goes beyond networking. It's like you will never get anywhere really putting other people's down. Maybe short term, you might see like a little bit of a boost, but long term, all of that will always come back to bite you, because at the end of the day, like Ola mentioned, people are smart and they know that if you're gonna act this way, like in front of me, you're doing this when I'm not around as well. And so it's only a matter of time until I am the one that you're shit talking. So just general advice for life is, speak positively of people. Obviously, don't over bloat someone, because your reputation is also on the line. So don't go over there and say this person is the absolute best at XYZ if they're not the absolute best at XYZ. But that doesn't mean that you go over to people and tell them this person absolutely sucks at XYZ.
Yep, I totally agree. Another one is don't be name dropping because you never know who doesn't like someone. So you might ruin a good potential friendship that you two connect by aligning yourself to someone that the person you're trying to connect with doesn't connect. I'd made that mistake before. This one was, I have battle scars from this. So please don't do that. Don't.
I'm interested in the story now. Maybe I'll ask you about it offline because it's funny. I have one to match with you, but I don't want to. I'd have to name drop in order to do that, and we're not going to do that on the pod. But yeah, we should chat about that.
What I always do now is when I meet someone and I know someone that they might know, I would say that with a preference, like, you know, I know this person in this setting. I don't know what else they do outside of that, but this is how I know them. So it sets the expectation that I'm not responsible for anything else outside of.
That's a good tip. That's a good tip.
Do you have someone? I have another one.
No, you please go.
The other one that I want to say is the best time to network is when you don't need to network. For context, I am no longer at Mars right now as of today, and you can tell I don't sound sad. Part of the reason is because my entire time at Mars and my career so far, I've just been networking like crazy, not because I want to, but genuinely helping people. You know, like someone has a problem with Mars Pro on Twitter. I'm not a support person, but I'm like helping them through that. And then they go and tell someone else. Like I help, this one is a real example. I helped them with something and then they started following me on Twitter. Then like 2 weeks later, I noticed that they bought something else that I'm doing with Notion that has nothing to do with SEO. And then like 2 months later, they referred me to someone that needed help with SEO. Like it was just this, from this one person, I've had so much opportunity, and all it took me was like 2 minutes to respond to them. And I didn't do it with any go. And it's the same even now. Like a lot of people are reaching out to me with like these job offers and all these opportunities, and it's just mind blowing. Like I'm thanking myself from like 5 years ago, like, good job, dude. Like, thanks for building this foundation. And it inspires me to keep that going. And it's not in a way of just because there's a result. It feels good too. It's back to the ecosystem. Don't just think of a certain network as an ecosystem. The entire human race is an ecosystem as well. You know, everything I just said earlier on about how you should contribute, you can do that in other ways as well. Mark mentioned having something to show, like sharing stuff on the internet. If you don't have content to share other people's content, comment on other people's content, like it, send them a DM to encourage them with stuff. There are ways that you can network without networking. Always be networking. ABN.
ABN. Also, I really like a piece you mentioned just before there, which was to do with the time that it took. Like you made a comment at some point in time, but then you didn't see it come back to you for a long period of time. And I think that can sometimes be a pitfall when it comes to networking, especially when you're going with a goal in mind. Like if you're going to, like you're looking for a job, for sure, it can feel like a failure when you met a bunch of people and then they didn't result in a job. But I think that's the wrong way of thinking about it. These networking activities that you're doing, building friendship, building relationships, they're all long-term things. And so you might think, oh, like, you know, that event was a failure, only met like 2 or 3 people and none of them led to any jobs. But you never know, like down the line, what that could actually lead to, whether they'll refer you or your services to somebody else, or whether you just make like a lifelong friend from that event, which is like the biggest win of all. So don't put a time frame on the results that you're expecting from some of these activities that we're talking about. Just continue to do them until they're like second nature to you and it's not something that you're thinking about anymore. You become an expert networker when you don't go out and do any networking. You're just living your life, and by virtue of doing those activities, things like you're building connections and things are coming back to you.
Yeah, that's great advice. I guess for my biggest takeaway from what you said is don't even try to network. Don't let networking be something you do. Let networking be something you are. Like you're a networker. As a human, just connect to other humans. Another pitfall, people that say they don't need networks. I was one of those people, and I remember someone telling me, we had a debate about it. I was much younger, and of course I was wrong. And he was like, Ola, you're not an island. I was like, oh, you can do this, you can do things by yourself, you're smart. And he's like, no, Ola, you're not an island. You need other people, trust me, you always do. And that line stuck with me, even when I didn't understand it at the time. But now is proven right over on time or time and time again. That there's no one is an island. You always need people to help you with something.
And I honestly think that's the perfect note to end this podcast on. You're not an island, which is why networking is even an important thing. That's why we even brought it up as a subject. You cannot build things by yourself. You cannot sell anything by yourself. You cannot survive if it's just you. And so spend as much time as you possibly can building those connections and learning from the people around you. I know that this is one of the ways that we do it, is through this podcast, through continuing to develop like our relationship, but as well as meeting new people and interviewing them and bringing them onto the pod. This is just all in an attempt to get to know more people, and it's honestly been an amazing journey so far.
Yeah, speaking of network, we want this to not just be a podcast that we're speaking to you. We want this to be a network of interconnected people. So we Mac, one of Mac's friends, is coming to the podcast soon. I'll get to meet him. Mac is meeting my friends. Y'all are meeting these people that you might not get a chance to meet. And hopefully we'll start meeting guests that none of us know as well. And please recommend the podcast to your friends. Share it with people. Talk to us, interact with us, and recommend guests that we might want to talk to as well. Even if it's someone who you are afraid to shoot your shots at and you have insights that you want to get from them, we'll help you. Remember when I said ecosystem earlier on? There are people who do things. Mark and I are very good at cold emailing people. We'll do that for you, and we'll get insights for you, and every one of us can share the same insights.
And speaking of us being able to get more and more people to join this network, one of the things that helps out this podcast a lot is when you guys give us a rating, when you guys give us like comments on YouTube and things like that, engage with us in any ways, giving us likes. All of that is really helpful for the almighty algorithm, as it will actually push this podcast even further out there, so we can have more and more interesting guests and connect you with more and more interesting gems.
I 1000% agree. Yeah, this was great.
This was amazing. Thank you so much for the time, Ola, and we'll see you guys next week.
See you next week. Same time, same place.